Hey guys, my 10 obscure Brazilian cars video I made a few months back to kick off my obscure cars from around the world series has been doing really well recently, and I've received a lot of comments suggesting cars and asking for a part 2. So for today's video, I have 10 more obscure Brazilian cars. Thank you guys for the support recently, and as always, I hope you enjoy this video. And with that, let's get started. The Miura X8 is a Brazilian sports car that was produced from 1987 to 1990. The car was powered by a Volkswagen-sourced 2-liter turbo or NA carbureted inline-4 engine. The horsepower figures were 112 horsepower for the alcohol-powered engine and 105 horsepower for the gasoline engine. This power was sent to the front wheels via a 5-speed manual transmission. The car was capable of a top speed of about 124 miles per hour. The main thing that makes this car so interesting are all of the special features it had, which were rare for the time. It had an onboard voice synthesizer, which warned drivers about ajar doors, fuel level, and seat belts. It also had things like remote control openable doors, electronically adjustable seats, electrically controlled side mirrors, and on later models, an electronically opening trunk. After the end of the X8's production, new models would also be made, such as the X11. Overall, this is a really cool and obscure car, and it was also way ahead of its time due to all of its futuristic features. The Willys Interlagos was a Brazilian market version of the French Alpine A108 that was introduced after an agreement between Alpine and Willys Overland. It was produced from 1962 to 1966 in coupe, convertible, and berlinette body styles. It was also extremely lightweight and weighed just 1,775 pounds. It was powered by a few 4-cylinder engines that ranged from 37 to 53 horsepower. The engine was located at the back of the car, and it used a 5-speed manual transmission which sent the engine power to the rear wheels. This one's a very nice looking car, and it's all the more special due to only 822 being made in total. Interestingly, a modern remake of the Interlagos created by a few Italian coach builders was proposed in 2014, and it was based on the current Alpine A110. At first glance, this car appears to be a kit car based on the Ford Mustang with a mishmash of Alfa Romeo parts. Believe it or not though, this is an actual production vehicle. This is the FNM Onca. FNM was a heavy truck brand that signed an agreement with Alfa Romeo to make trucks for them, and eventually Alfa allowed them to make cars under license, which is why the Onca looks so much like an Alfa Romeo. FNM eventually showcased the Onca prototype, which means Jaguar, at the 1966 Sao Paulo Motor Show. They started selling the car shortly after. This car was only available in 2+2 coupe form and was powered by a 2-liter straight-4 gasoline engine, which made about 113 horsepower and 123 pound-foot of torque, and this was sent to the rear wheels via a 5-speed manual transmission. This gave the car a top speed of about 109 miles per hour. It's estimated that only about 4 of these cars were sold before the project was called off due to disapproval from Alfa Romeo. The FNM company would go on to build another model, the Furia, which resembled the Lamborghini Jurama, a few years later. It's a shame the Onca project didn't get very far, as in my opinion, it would have been interesting to see where this would have gone if FNM had continued to produce this car. The TAC, or Tecnologia Automotiva Catarinense, Stark, is a lightweight Brazilian off-road vehicle that has been produced from 2009 to present and is currently the only vehicle being produced by the brand. It's meant to compete with similar small off-road vehicles such as the Mitsubishi Pajero TR4 and the Suzuki Jimny. This car has a wheelbase of just about 8 feet, and the body is made of plastic to prevent rust. The Stark is pretty lightweight and weighs just 3,605 pounds. This car is available in 4-wheel drive only and is powered by a 2.3-liter turbo diesel 4-cylinder engine, which makes around 126 horsepower and 221 pound-foot of torque. The power this engine makes gets sent through a 5-speed manual transmission to all 4 wheels. I'm a huge fan of off-road vehicles in general, so this one piqued my interest for sure. The MP Lafer was a Brazilian 2-seat roadster that had a fiberglass body and began production in 1974. The car was created by a furniture designer by the name of Percival Lafer. This car's styling was largely based on the MG Roadsters of the 1940s and 50s. However, similar to the Bianco S from part 1 of this video, the Lafer borrowed pretty much all of its running gear, including the engine, from the Volkswagen Beetle. There was also a newer TI model that was introduced in 1984, but had mostly the same features. In total, about 4,300 MP Lafers were built, and it is believed that about 1,000 were exported to places like the United States and Europe. I think this is an interesting car, as it was like Brazil's version of the classic British Roadsters from back in the day. The Dacon 828 was a small city car that was made in Brazil from 1983 to 1994. Only about 47 cars were sold during this time. If parts of this car look familiar to you, that's actually because Dacon was a Brazilian representation of Porsche, and this car uses many parts from the Porsche 928 sports car, such as the wheels, doors, and lights. The 828 had a rear engine layout. Instead of a normal chassis, this car used a system called nice elliptical survive rings. What these were was a series of ellipses shaped into chassis form, which created a much lighter yet still strong chassis. The 828 was powered by a 64 horsepower 1.6-liter Boxer 4 engine originating from the Volkswagen Beetle, but there was also an engine option that provided 67 horsepower. The power this car made was sent through a manual transmission to the front wheels. The 828 also had alcohol-powered engine options, similar to other Brazilian cars I've covered. Some other features this car had were a backpack space in the interior, McPherson struts, and brake discs on all 4 wheels. This is a car unlike really any I've seen before, and I've never really heard of any economy cars based on Porsche sports cars that came out of Brazil. This car is possibly the most requested of all on this list. This is an all-electric city car that was introduced in 1974 and produced by the Gurgel car company, and this was also the first ever electric car built in Latin America. This car had a unique trapezoid-like design that was similar to other city cars of the time. The Itaipu E150 weighed just 1,014 pounds and was only available in 2-door form. It used a 3 kilowatt lead-acid battery, which made just 4 horsepower and provided a range of about 37 to 50 miles. Power was sent through a single-speed reduction gear for the transmission. The latest prototypes had a top speed of about 37 miles per hour. This car was really only produced in prototype form, and the car was never commercialized, with only a few ever being produced. After production of this car was finished, its successor, the Itaipu E400, which was an electric commercial vehicle, was produced. I really liked the E150 for its unique looks, and I think this car was really ahead of its time. This car is definitely my favorite on this list. Around the 1980s, the Brazilian government had strict laws regarding the importation of foreign cars. As a result of this, Mario Richard Hofstetter came up with the idea to produce a domestically built sports car. He quickly got to work designing the car he named Turbo, and started the Hofstetter Company in 1984. This would be the only car produced by the company. The Turbo had gull-wing doors and a fiberglass body. The interior was upholstered in leather, and even had a digital dash, which was a rare feature to see in cars during the time. The car had a rear mid-engine, rear-wheel drive layout, and was powered by 2 different engines throughout its production. The first few models were powered by a 1.8-liter inline-4 engine from the Volkswagen Passat with a Garrett turbocharger and used a 4-speed manual transmission. These engines made about 140 horsepower and gave the car a 0 to 60 time of about 9.3 seconds. These turbos could go on to a top speed of 120 miles per hour. The last set of models were powered by a 2-liter inline-4 from the Volkswagen Santana and were equipped with the same turbocharger. These i4 engines made 210 horsepower and gave the turbo a new top speed of around 147 miles per hour. The turbo was produced from 1986 to 1991, and during that time only 18 were made, making the turbo quite rare. As I said at the beginning of this entry, this is for sure my favorite car of all on this list, and it's really cool to look at and research domestically produced Brazilian sports cars such as this one. It also sounds pretty good. This is an interesting one. If you've heard of Alfa Romeo, you probably know that it's a luxury car brand that originated in Italy. Well, what if I told you that there is actually one Alfa Romeo model that's Brazilian? This is the Alfa 2300. Production of this car was largely handled by the previously mentioned FNM brand that had recently partnered with Alfa around the time this car started production. The 2300 was built in Italy and sold in Brazil. Production of the car started in 1974 and ended in 1986, and each Alfa 2300 was produced in Italy and then shipped over to Brazil to be sold. The car had a front-engine, rear-wheel drive layout, a 5-speed manual transmission, and the only body style was the 4-door sedan form. The 2300 was supposed to be available with i4 and V6 engine options, but the V6 engine was dropped due to the oil crisis that took place in the 1970s. Instead, it was available with just a 2.3-liter inline-4 engine, which made about 140 horsepower and was able to get the 2300 to a top speed of 106 miles per hour. The car was eventually imported to Europe for sale in 1981, where it was mostly a flop and didn't sell that well. Overall, quite an interesting car. The Brasinca 4200 GT
Uirapuru
was a Brazilian sports coupe that was produced from 1964 to 1966. This car was sort of a marketing gimmick from Brasinca, which was a truck and car part manufacturer, to show its capabilities in automobile production. This car was a production vehicle and was available in both coupe and convertible form. This is actually a very good looking car, and it also made a good amount of power, with its Chevrolet inline-6 truck engine producing 155 horsepower. It was later made available in S, GT, and GTS trims, which all provided substantial increases in power and performance. Over its production, only 77 were made in total, so this one is a bit rare. This is possibly the best looking car on this list, even if its name is a little hard to pronounce. And those are 10 more obscure Brazilian cars for you guys. There were quite a few suggestions for cars for me to cover in this video, so I tried my best to include the most requested ones. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe. We're nearing 1,000 subscribers, so it would be a really big help. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.